Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomeyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomeyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste. Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am so grateful that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Renee Clair. Renee is the founder of Clair de Lune Yoga. She's a yoga and meditation teacher who is passionate about helping yoga teachers build their teams in order to offload tasks and accomplish their dream goals. She's a yoga teacher who works for yoga teachers by recruiting multi-talented yogis, and that is her ultimate happy place and a lot of what we're going to focus this episode of the show on. So I got connected with Renee via my friend Shannon Crow, who is the host of the Connected Yoga Teacher, and Renee and I connected because I was looking to hire someone, and she really helped me find my assistant and figure out what I was looking for in somebody on my team. And so I wanted to have a conversation with Renee about that, how to hire somebody. And so for many of you listening, maybe you're in a place where you feel like you could use some help or your business could really thrive by hiring somebody on your team and you just have no idea where to get started. And we're going to cover a lot of that. For other people listening, you might be thinking, I am not in a place where I can afford to hire somebody, and I don't think I need to hire somebody. And maybe there'll be some interesting insights about how having somebody on your team can help you. So we're going to talk a little bit about Renee's yoga story, how she got into yoga, what inspires her, a bit about what she does with her yoga business. And then we'll talk about the process of recruiting, why it's important to hire help when we need it, how to decide what tasks we want to hire out, and then, of course, where we actually go to find these people. So I hope that you really enjoy this episode of the podcast. And before we dive into the episode with Renee, just a quick little word from OfferingTree. This episode is brought to you by OfferingTree. When you're a yoga teacher and you're trying to build your digital presence, it can be daunting, especially right now when you are trying to take your offerings online as fast as possible. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes that has your schedule built right in. They also have email marketing tools to collect email addresses, send newsletters, and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. Forget spending all your time and energy just trying to remember what account does what and what your login information is. On top of that, OfferingTree has an embedded scheduling feature, so if you already have a website that you love, you can use it for online payments and scheduling. They have also just announced that they now have Stripe integration so that people from Canada, the UK, Australia, and 30 plus countries can accept payments using OfferingTree. This is something that a lot of people have been asking for, and it is finally live. So that is super exciting. To learn more about what OfferingTree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. OfferingTree has been supporting MBOM for over a year now, and I not only love the product, but I also love the people. And OfferingTree is also providing special pricing for MBOM listeners. So be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive your discount. Welcome to the podcast today, Renee. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Thank you, Amanda. It's great to be on, and I can't wait to talk with you about recruiting.
Yeah, I am so excited for this conversation and everything we're going to cover. And my first question for you is, where are you joining me from today?
Ooh, I am in Northern California. I'm in a town called Fairfield.
Oh, amazing. I love it. And so, like you said, we're going to be covering recruiting. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about your yoga story and back up a little bit. Can you tell me how you first got into yoga and what inspired you to become a yoga teacher?
Yeah, sure. I actually like to say that yoga found me. I have been dealing with anxiety and depression for most of my life, and it was especially bad in my early teens and 20s. And I was trying everything from meditation to Ayurveda and doing some yoga poses that I just really didn't quite get. And I have kind of a funny story for you. In 2001, I went to a yoga gym class with my bestie, and we got there late, as you do when you're in your early 20s. We rolled out our mats, and the first pose I ever got into was downward facing dog. And I looked at everybody else. Their heels were on the floor. Everybody was doing this magnificent job. And I looked at my best friend, and she was like, "What are we doing?" And no joke, I rolled up my mat, and then we left class early. That is a crazy story that as a yoga teacher, I have to share, because if you struggle with downward dog or being uncomfortable in yoga, you're not alone. And then so in 2010, I started a new job and was introduced to corporate yoga. My teacher at the time was Crystal Cuevas, and she taught me beginning Ashtanga. I totally fell in love. Her personality was just incredible and welcoming, and I really enjoyed doing yoga with my colleagues and just seeing their stress levels reduce. And of course, I went to corporate yoga just again for a workout, but I quickly started seeing that, oh my gosh, something was magically happening in Shavasana. I was starting to feel relaxed, and I could really start to focus on my tasks at my job. In 2014, I was laid off from that job, and I moved to California, and I just was missing the yoga atmosphere. It's kind of tough when you make this big move. And I moved from Texas, everybody. And so I just knew that I wanted to be in the yoga atmosphere. So I joined Yoga Community in Sonoma, California, and I quickly took a yoga teacher training in the Raja yoga tradition with Barbara Brady and Lisa Murray. And I just knew after that I wanted to spread the love of yoga to other professionals to help them reduce their anxiety through meditation and movement, and just ultimately feel lighter.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. It's an inspiring story to hear. And so what did your career look like after you started teaching or after you became a yoga teacher?
I had a full-time job, and I was teaching classes. I was teaching about, 3 to 6 classes. I started off teaching beginning yoga and meditation, of course. But quickly I started noticing I was burning out. And it's kind of, tough for a yoga teacher to admit that they're getting burned out when they're doing all the things, eating right and balancing their schedule and teaching yoga and doing yoga. So I decided that it was time for me to work remotely, to spend time with my dog. And I knew that working online, if I could work online, I could teach yoga online too. I'm so thankful to Shannon Crow, because she is a yoga consultant, and she has the the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. And she really helped me through this time as I shifted to start teaching yoga online and working part-time too. I now
Yeah.
focus on really helping women entrepreneurs who work from home as well.
Amazing. I love that. And I was just going to say, I love Shannon Crow, big fan of her. She's definitely, one of my favorite yoga teacher, business podcasters, all that good stuff. She's been such a huge support for my business as well. And, she's like the reason that we know each other. So I'm grateful for that also.
Yes, she's just completely incredible, and she really held space for me, and is a big reason of why I'm able to talk to you about recruiting for yoga teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you kind of mentioned it before, but can you tell, myself and listeners a little bit about your yoga business and what you offer for yoga teachers?
Yeah, of course. I'm really grateful to be a complete entrepreneur. So I don't, work for anybody at this point, and I work remotely, get to travel. And a few years ago, I started working with someone named Brian Hitano at Indie Recruiting. I started off doing project and process management, and then it's evolved into technical recruiting, which is recruiting engineers that are in the hardware and software arenas. It's really challenging. Along the way, I started my own podcast, and I was really struggling with learning how to edit audio. And I realized I needed to hire someone. I just needed to take this off my plate. And the minute that I hired my amazing audio engineer, I quickly got unstuck, and my podcast has been moving forward in ways that I never imagined it could. During one of my projects at Indie Recruiting, I started interviewing yoga teachers and some of my yoga teacher friends, and I was wondering what was holding them back from projects they had on their plates. And I noticed several pain points. They had extra jobs like me. They were struggling with a certain aspect of their business, which I noticed was kind of mainly in the social media or like admin tasks. And then they were feeling burnout and stuck. Like they couldn't move forward. They almost were thinking about giving up their yoga business. And when the big change for me is when I noticed one of my fellow yoga teachers was hiring for a social media manager. I just said, hey, I recruit. I can really help you with this process. Are you interested? And she said yes. And I had the best time, and I really think she had the best time. And I found my flow. It was just my complete happy place of combining business with yoga.
I feel like it's so inspiring to hear that, because it's like, I mean, I feel like as a yoga teacher, we're not usually like, hey, let's go into yoga teacher training and create a business where I help yoga teachers recruit, right? It's like you became a yoga teacher for a totally different reason and, started your business kind of a little bit differently than that. And obviously you have other elements to your business also outside of the recruiting, and then drew in this other experience you had from the corporate world when you found that there was a need for that. So I think it's just a really inspiring example of how sometimes our path takes us in a direction that we never expect and that we almost can't even plan for.
Thank you. Yes. Yoga has taken me into the wildest places I've only dreamed, as far as travel and work experiences. And I just am really grateful to just kind of be going with the flow now and seeing where life takes me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that as well, for sure. It's like this wild journey that I never could have predicted when I decided to sign up for a 200-hour yoga teacher training program.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's dive into recruiting a little bit and really get into kind of like the nitty gritty of that. One of the reasons why, I'm really excited to talk to you about this is because you were able to help me, find somebody to work with. So somebody who's, a virtual assistant, or we'll probably refer to that type of role as a VA. So for anyone listening, if you don't know what a VA is, it's virtual assistant. Admin assistant is another word for it. And, there's all types of roles that we can hire for in our businesses. So you could call that whatever you want, but you were able to help me find my VA and really helped me narrow in what I was looking for. I feel like that conversation we had where you just asked me a bunch of questions about what I really need help with was so helpful for me in figuring out who this person was going to be that I wanted to work with. And one of the things that stands out for me in that experience is, we were talking about how, a lot of times VAs are responsible for email systems. And I think I immediately was like, nope, I am not giving over control of my email inbox to maybe a stranger, maybe somebody I know. I ended up hiring somebody that I did know in my network. But even with somebody that I already have previous trust with, I was like, I don't want anyone doing that. And it was a reminder having that conversation with you that there's no one right way to have somebody in our business, and that was something that you really helped me with. So I just wanted to kind of preamble with that.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me so, so happy. And you're absolutely right. One size does not fit all here. And anybody that we choose to hire for our team, they need to be unique and fit certain characteristics that we and values that we hold dear, and mesh with our own styles. So that it really did make me happy to hear you go, nope, I'm sure I don't want this to happen, but I do want these things to happen. And that's all it really is just kind of asking the right questions, either to yourself or having them be asked to you, and then deciding what's really truly important for you.
Yeah.
And there is someone for you, I promise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I guess maybe was like there's a couple things that was holding me back from, hiring somebody. One was, of course, like a little bit of the fear around like money, because that's always tough as entrepreneurs. And I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit more. But it was also that I felt like, okay, virtual assistants help plan events and they help do bookings and they, are that person that I interact with in somebody's email. And I was like, I don't really want somebody to do that. So like maybe I don't need somebody to help me. And one of the biggest learnings I had was like, okay, well, I do need somebody to help me. I just need to identify like the things that I want somebody to help me with. Like, what are the things in my business that I can use the most assistance with, and that I could find somebody that I trust to do these things that bog me down every day. And, now I've had that for a couple of months, and we were talking about this before we hit record on this, and you were just checking in with how I was doing. And I was just saying, like, I feel like I'm, a little bit more free and have more room to grow. And it's really been super rewarding for me to be able to have somebody else on my team. So that's just adding to my preamble about why this conversation is important and why I think that, as yoga teachers, we really need to be considering this.
Yes, definitely. I've noticed that quite a few of us, including me, we really pride ourselves on being solopreneurs. But I found an interesting excerpt when I was doing my reading the other day from a book called No Mud, No Lotus. Have you heard of it, Amanda?
I have heard of it, but I've never read it.
Okay, it's a really neat, like really short book. And on page 78, there's a section called Collective Action. And it reads, when a group comes together and commits to practicing mindfulness together, breathing together, walking together, doing some kind of good work together to lessen the suffering in the world, this is positive collective action that can be very powerful. There is really no absolute individuality. There is no absolute collectivity. And that just like really made me open my eyes as an entrepreneur the other day, because we're yoga teachers and we're bringing people together. We want them to yoke with their mind and body, but we're not doing it within our businesses. We're not, offloading some tasks that maybe we're not the best at, or maybe we just don't have time for, and letting someone else come in to really help us and take what we're trying to offer the world to an even bigger audience. And so I just really believe that when we're able to kind of let go of our ego and let someone else come in, that there's so much room to shine a little more brightly. And then in turn, we're really helping the person that we're hiring to come on the mission with us and maybe figure out their own calling along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's so beautifully said, and that book sounds amazing. So I'll have to add that to my Kindle reading list. And so one of the first things I'm curious about is, as solopreneurs or as entrepreneurs, how do we know when we're ready to hire?
Ooh, this one, this is a good question. What I've noticed from some of the yoga teachers that I've talked to or worked with is that they begin to feel incredibly discouraged. I noticed that they're working a lot and they're feeling kind of overly responsible. They're feeling like their dreams for their yoga biz are just so far away, and they just start to kind of feel almost exasperated. Sometimes there's a little bit of that feeling stuck, that pit of the stomach dread for certain tasks. Amanda, do you know that feeling?
Yeah, 100%. Like, oh
Yeah.
God, I got to go on Instagram today. I don't want to.
Yeah, me too. That audio editing is like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the things that I've noticed, that it's a good time to think about offloading some things, and that way you can get rid of that yucky feeling and reduce that ego talk in the background.
Right. Yeah. I feel like that's, something obviously that I can relate to, like I just mentioned. And for me, it really felt like I was surviving, not thriving. Like I was barely keeping my head above water. I was barely getting like all the tasks that I had allotted for myself done in a day. And there was just like no time and space for growth to happen.
Yes. Yes. There's a theory in learning. It's called cognitive load theory. And in psychology, it says that as we begin to learn like new things, there's a portion of what we're learning that gets forgotten. And if we don't continue practicing a new learned behavior or skill, that it gets forgotten as well. And so there is a reason why we as yoga teachers, as entrepreneurs, feel like we're not moving because we're not just learning a new skill set. We're not just learning yoga. We're learning the roles of like 3 to 5 people, everybody, even more so than 5 people. So it makes sense that we're not able to kind of hold on to some skills, or we may forget, or we just don't have time to execute on the things that we know.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense for sure. And so I'm sure that one thing that somebody's thinking about is like, okay, so I feel this like bogged down feeling, or I feel like, okay, I'd love some help, but I'm not making enough money. Like how do we balance that? Like kind of knowing when we're ready financially, and I guess like trusting that investing in our business is going to be positive for us in order to grow.
That's a really great question, Amanda, and a really it's a toughie. But the things that I've noticed that work for the yoga teachers that I've spoken with are they set some time aside, just like they would for their personal finances, to budget. So, for personally, I want to go to France. I should probably start saving or budget and see how much extra funds I can put away to go to France. It's kind of like that as well for hiring someone. So you look at your business finances, your business expenses, and just kind of sit there and notice if you have $50 extra, 100, 2,000, and that's kind of how you know a starting budget, and you can go from there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. That definitely makes sense. And I think that, I talk a lot about on the podcast how getting comfortable with our money and our money story and our money situation is really important. And I think that this is just another piece to it. Being really clear and honest with where the money is and where it's coming from and how it's being allotted. And I think too, for me, like this was something that I really thought about before hiring somebody. And I just really came back to this idea of like, okay, but if I don't hire somebody, I'm never going to make more money. Like it's just not going to happen that I'm going to bring more money in because I'm already like at full capacity just doing what I'm doing. And I feel like that's kind of like one of the things that I think about a lot for myself personally, because I think there's this kind of idea, especially in the solopreneur area, is like, oh, you must be like making a lot of money if you've hired like a VA or if you've hired a production assistant or something for like your podcast, for example. And for me personally, like my financial situation is comfortable. It's fine. I have steady income coming in from a number of different places, but like I'm not sitting over here like rolling in dollar bills or something like that. Like it's something that I monitor every single month and I look at, even within the month to make sure that I'm still on track and looking at areas where I can bring in more business. Like, so I think it's just a reminder that like you just have to kind of balance between like, okay, what is some, output that I can do and recognizing that it's going to be massive to free up a couple hours of your week so that you can then focus your time on like bringing in more income.
Right. I cannot agree with you more, Amanda. The question I would encourage our listeners to ask themselves is, or just to be aware of this task has to get done whether you hire someone or not. So how is your time best spent? And what will help you to really enjoy your work? And where could your business go if you got rid of some tasks? And Amanda, I'm so grateful that you've shown how your business has grown in just this short period of time after hiring your VA, which is so encouraging. And I also want to suggest that everybody think of hiring someone like an expense that's really necessary for your business. Like I have acuity, and that's taken out of my, it's part of my monthly business expenses. And I have Zoom, and that's part of my monthly business expenses. And I also have my audio engineer. That's part of my monthly business expenses. So if you can think about it like that, that will just kind of keep everything cohesive for you.
Absolutely. I love that tip. Okay. So somebody has, hopefully decided like, okay, I'm going to make the leap. I'm going to hire somebody. How do we decide what tasks we want to hire out? And I'm excited, to dive into this because like you really honestly helped me get so much clarity on this. It was so, so helpful to hop on a call with you and have this conversation.
Yay! What I've seen from other yoga teachers is that they already know what they wish they could dole out. So I definitely say follow your inner guide, and just really come back to that question again. Where could you take your business if you offloaded these tasks? The tasks to look for are the ones that seem to be the time suckers, the ones that you always put to the side, the ones that you say you don't have time for, or that you just loathe every time you're doing it. For me, probably the next person I will hire is a social media person, because, oh my gosh, it's a lot personally for me. And, knowing now what I know after hiring my audio editor, is just like, wow, like things can move forward. So examples of some people that might help you or that you might consider hiring is a social media manager, is someone to do your admin tasks like a virtual assistant or VA. Maybe a community manager, so someone who answers all of your responses on your social media sites. Or if your business is at the point where you have various courses, maybe a program manager, someone who's your right-hand person, who's going to understand the courses that you have ready to go. Or maybe you're rolling out a live event and you want someone there to just really understand your program. Just know that you're going to really enjoy your work even more the more that you can offload the tasks that aren't enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is huge. And I think that it's just, having a conversation with somebody like yourself or, maybe even like a partner, a friend, or a biz bestie or something where you can just talk really honestly about the things that you don't love doing in your business can be so helpful. Cause I think you're exactly right. Like, I think I knew all of that information before we sat down and chatted. Like, I just don't think I gave myself the time and the space to actually be honest about like, this task is draining me. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes. And I think it was somebody, oh gosh, it was Shannon who was like, have you considered hiring an audio editor? It was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I was just going to say Shannon's like, her and I have talked a lot just from podcasting because we started our podcast around similar times and, got to know each other right away. And she has always said like right from the beginning, like, she's like, I don't know how to edit audio. Like, I've had an audio editor like right from the beginning. Like, it was something that she identified right out the gate that she's like, I don't want to learn this. Like, that's not why I'm starting a podcast. And yeah, so I think it's just, a reminder that looking at these tasks that maybe don't serve us or aren't the best use of our time, or maybe are going to take a lot of learning, it's often better to hire them out. Like, I think about, website design is something that I think sometimes people get really, really bogged down in trying to do themselves. Sometimes it's logo design. Things like audio production or getting your podcast together can definitely be something like that. Social media, like that's definitely one for me. That's the little tasks of going on social media were like really, really taking up a lot of my time because I just get sucked into this like wormhole of social media. Like, going to tag somebody was like, okay, it's like an hour of my day because I get so distracted.
Yes, I definitely go down. I call it the social media black hole. So many people have suggested do a timer. I've tried that. It doesn't work. I can't wait to hire someone to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast episode to talk about an upcoming training that I am going to be offering. It is a podcast pitch training called How to Be a Great Podcast Guest, and it is happening on May 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern. I have been a podcast host for 6 years now, and over the last couple years of having a couple different podcasts that I'm a part of or that I work on, I have received hundreds and hundreds of pitches for people to be guests on the podcast. And so I have come together with a couple of other yoga podcast friends that you probably know since they've all been on the show. This training is going to be co-led by myself, Amanda McKinney from Marketing Yoga with Confidence, Shannon Crow from the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, and Mado Hesselink from the Yoga Teacher Resource podcast. Between the four of us, we have received so many podcast pitches, and we want to help you learn how to not only just be a podcast guest, but be an awesome podcast guest. Everything starts with the pitch. So we are coming together to teach you tips on how to send successful pitches that lead to interviews, how to get invited back multiple times. After seeing hundreds of pitches come through our inboxes, we've got lots of great tips for you. So in this training, you will learn how to find podcasts to pitch, how to write great pitches that will actually get noticed and responded to. We will talk about pitching mistakes that land your pitch in the trash, what podcast hosts are looking for in a guest, what kind of technology and or equipment you'll need, how to up your chances of getting invited back in the future, and how to leverage your appearance to increase credibility with your own audience. So if you have been thinking about using podcast marketing as a way to get more traction with your business, I would love for you to join us for this training. It's on May 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern. There will be a replay provided after the fact. So if you are interested in learning more, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com/events to get started and to register. If you have any questions, let me know. Once again, it's mbomyoga.com/events. All right, back to the episode. And so, okay, we sit down, we identify the tasks that maybe aren't serving us. And I guess also one thing with that too, that I feel like is important to add is like doing it in a way that's guilt-free. Like, I don't know if you've experienced this with people you've worked with, but I feel like when you create a business and run a business on your own, like as a solopreneur, kind of like you mentioned before, there's a little bit of this like, I guess, desire not to admit that you need help. And I think that there can also be this like, you don't want to admit that there's things in your business that you don't love doing, because I think sometimes we think like, oh, I should love doing it all. Like, I'm so lucky to do this type thing.
Yes, I'm really I don't know if it's our culture, our generation of why we have this need to do it all. And I'm speaking from totally being that person, super type A. But and it also could be perception. I think sometimes we see people out on social media, it just looks like one person that they're doing it all, but I don't think they're giving enough props or really lifting the curtain to show the team that they do have that's helping them. So as much as you can, talk to other people and just see what they're doing, you know. And I'm glad that like at least Amanda and I can talk about it out loud to say it's really okay to delegate tasks, and actually to keep in mind that a true leader is someone who delegates tasks.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And that's definitely something I've learned over the last couple months of having, people that I work with. So it is very true. It can be like a hard lesson to learn, but it's definitely true for sure.
Yes.
And so once we figured out kind of what tasks we want somebody to do, how do we go about actually finding that person that we want to hire? Like, where do we find them? How do we figure out what type of person they are and all that good stuff?
I hear you loud and clear. It can seem really daunting. At least my yoga teacher friends have told me, they're like, where do I start? So as far as starting with the type of person that you want to hire, I would encourage, and I've asked some of my yoga clients these questions, like what is your work schedule? So actually, let me back up. The questions to determine what kind of person you should hire lie within yourself, right? So what is your work schedule? Are you a night owl? Or do you like to work in the morning? Do you work, sporadic hours during the week? And to think about time zone. So if let's say that you're on Central Time, it could be beneficial to have someone that's working within Central Time Zone too, or maybe work later hours And so someone in Pacific time zone would match well with you. So that's just something kind of interesting to note, especially if you're looking to hire someone online. And that's kind of the next question is, do you prefer to work online or in person with people? Like if you're an online yoga teacher, you'd probably benefit from working with a virtual assistant. Or if you're someone who likes to teach in person and you really like, that in-person energy, you might want to find someone that's, within your hometown or where you're currently living. Another question to maybe ask yourself are what are the values that are super important to you? Some of my recent clients have reported, the person has to be a people person. They just have to, or they need to take accountability for their mistakes. That's the big thing for me. Or they're not people pleasing. They're going to call me out, which is kind of a tough value for some people. Another question is, what type of task or many tasks would you like to offload? And luckily we've been talking about that already, but to, maybe sit down and just write them out. That will point you in the right direction of who you want to hire. And what kind of person do you typically work well with? Are they like you? Do you want to work with someone who's like the opposite than you? Maybe you're an extrovert and you want to work with someone who's an introvert, or a nerdy person and you're the vocal person, or maybe you need someone who's just like you. So those are just a few of the many questions to consider the type of person you'd like to hire. And as far as where to find your dream person, I've seen some yoga teachers start off their recruiting process by using like Monster, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and there is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with putting an ad on like Craigslist or something. But what I've noticed is they really found it to be like a long and tedious process. But what I've found that a lot of yoga teachers have done, and that's proven successful, is just asking the people that are in your own network. And it's kind of like this like aha moment when you just realize that your person, you probably already know them, or they're just dying for the chance to work with you. And Amanda, I know you've had that experience.
Yeah, that was like 100% my experience. Was like, okay, you and I met, and then I was like, just kind of percolating on the whole idea of like who this dream person was. And then I realized that I already knew who this person was. And all I had to do was send an email to them. And I was like, okay, I might have to sell them on this. I don't know how busy they are. And her response was like, yeah, I'd love to. Like, tell me what's next. I was like, sweet. That was easy.
It's such an incredible success story because I couldn't believe it. It didn't even take a few days or a few weeks. I can't remember what it was, but it was so short, and she was already working with you. And I was like, whoa, just mind blown, So I thank you for sharing that with everybody. It makes me so happy that you guys connected and work so well together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's like, I've been on the side of working with like lots of different people, and I've been on the hiring side of trying to find somebody who's good for a team in a different job capacity. And like, it's not always that easy. I think I was really lucky in the fact that like just sitting down and kind of visualizing what this person was going to be like, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I already know that person. But I think that like you mentioned this, like our network, I think is something that we just shouldn't discredit. Like, as yoga teachers, especially, like we are in contact with a lot of different people. And so I think that putting, that you're looking for somebody of, certain traits to help with certain stuff out to your network might mean that like that person's really not that far out of your reach.
Right. And the ego might try to say, don't ask your network for help, but that's not what yoga is about. Yoga is always about teaming up, joining together, creating community. And so I just want to encourage people to kind of just be aware of that. If your thoughts come to like, no, I don't want to ask the people I know for help, just kind of sit and wonder why about it, but it is amazing. And with my clients who put out the word for help, the word that they're hiring, they get responses immediately back. People are so excited to give back to you because you've helped them so much on their yoga journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like like newsletters, or I guess like email lists, Facebook, Facebook groups. Are those like good places to kind of start? Like, say you are a yoga teacher and you're uncomfortable with the idea of like just, pitching people after class, which I totally understand, is just reaching out to that network that you do have access to, like a good place to start with that?
Oh yes, yeah. Wherever you live. So if you find that you have a large community through your newsletter, definitely do that. And Facebook has also been used by some of the teachers I've worked with, and Instagram makes sense too. It's pretty easy. You could even like just put a little blurb in your story if you don't feel like comfortable with doing a post, but just try it out. You never know what you might get. And I would be careful if you're a yoga teacher and you're working at a studio to try to ask students for help in that kind of environment. You might want to check with your studio owners just to be cautious of their roles and boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. That's for sure something that's good to remind people of. And I think just something good to consider when you are working in somebody else's space. And something that I'm curious about, and I know that this is something that you do help yoga teachers with, is like the interviewing process. So say that you are interviewing a couple different people, like maybe you send an email, what are some key things to kind of look for? I think I've thought a lot about how like I feel like the job interview process is very flawed, but at the same time I don't have a solution for it because I feel like it's like really all you can do is interview and talk to that person. So I'm curious if you have any tips for like what types of questions to ask, or like what to kind of be looking for in those interviews.
Ooh, this is a really good question, Amanda. I like it. One of the things that I've used, one of the interviewing techniques that I've used is called the STAR method. And it's the type of question that you want to ask people. The STAR stands for situation. So you ask about a situation. The T is for task. You ask, or you're expecting the response of them giving you the task that they did. The A is for action, and the R is the result. So when you ask an open-ended question, you want to guide or listen or look for the candidate, and that's the person you're interviewing. If you're looking for them to tell you the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And that will really help you to understand their work style, their work ethic. The type of questions that you want to ask definitely come back to the values that we've talked about, the values that you hold. So you want to really kind of ask maybe a situational question. Let's say that you want to talk about accountability. You really want someone to hold accountable. For example, maybe come up with a question like, can you tell me about a time when you noticed that a task wasn't being done at work? What did you do? And you're looking for them to say, oh, I jumped in and helped, and this is how I did it. The other questions that you should ask revolve around the tasks that you want them to do. Ask them straight up for examples of the specific tasks. Like, if you want them to write an email, ask them how they go about deciding what to write in an email. Maybe about courses that they've taken to do social media, if that's the person that you're looking for. So again, values, and then the tasks and skills that you want them to do. And maybe any knowledge areas in case you want someone to grow within your organization. Maybe look for what they've learned along the way, what they want to learn more about. And then a really tough question that I really encourage everyone to ask when they're doing interviews is, what is your asking pay rate? I know that is such a tough one, but that will really help you to gauge what the market is asking for right now, and kind of just give you a preview into how much a person is really asking for. Sometimes they ask for a lot and they don't have enough experience, and you can say, okay, this person isn't the right person for my team. There's nothing wrong with what they're asking for. Or you might find someone who fits really nicely within your budget. Is that helpful, Amanda?
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I'm glad that you brought up the asking the pay rate, because I feel like, we're kind of programmed to not talk about those things. And I feel like it can be uncomfortable, but I think that it is important. Like, if your budget is $20 an hour and somebody's asking rate is 35, but you like get really attached to that person. I mean, I think it's important to know like right off the gate if they're within your budget or not. And, you know, it's okay if they're not. It's okay if they charge more because of experience, but I feel like that is something that's really important to know.
Yeah. Yes. And it will kind of answer that question that we're all wondering, how do I know how much to pay someone? If while you're asking, or maybe you send an application and you include that in there, you already give yourself that answer. You can already give yourself this range, and it's really nice, and it takes the pressure off of you from trying to do a lot of research for it.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. This conversation has been so awesome, Renee. You've shared so much good stuff. And I know that you work with yoga teachers, like you said. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about your offerings and then where people can go to find you.
Yes, of course. I'm still exploring helping out yoga and other wellness professionals on building their teams, aka recruiting. And I'm curious as to how many people are interested in this type of service. So if if you are, I'd love for you to reach out to me directly if you think, oh yeah, this is definitely what I need, or you want direct support, you have questions, or you just want to encourage me to help other yoga teachers. Maybe you're not ready for it right now, but in the future, that would really help to guide me in the right direction. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Clair de Lune Yoga. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I love my new name. It's the Recruiting Yogi. There's no spaces. And if you just type the Recruiting Yogi, you'll find me on LinkedIn. And then if you don't have any of those, if you're not a social media person, I do not blame you. Feel free to email me at info@renee-clair.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll make sure there's links to all of that in the show note. And thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, Amanda, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun and a complete honor.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.